years ago, I mean, nobody knows really how long ago. Some people say, 15th centuries, 14th, 13th, whatever. There was a family living up there in an old shack, and the remains of it are still there. And I actually did find this building, just like the footings of it, years ago. Do you think I can find it again? I can't find it. It's in the woods. Obviously it's in the woods somewhere. But apparently a family lived there. Mother, father and 2 girls. And we know the girls were named Deleth and Nancy. And they were considered by the locals to be a bit strange. So whether that means they were a bit psychotic or whatever, or just looked a bit odd. They probably looked different. So whether they were dark skinned or I don't really know. But anyway, and of course in those days people thought if you lived in the woods you must be a bit strange anyway, because woods were quite fearful places. You didn't walk lightly through woods. People were quite scared of the woods generally. And Nancy and Deleth were great because they lived totally wild lives, And Nancy in particular was the older. Could climb trees. She could run, run like a deer. She's incredible. And her sister was a lot quieter, but not quite as active and not quite as wild maybe as Nancy. And then one day they got visited by some people from the village, and there was a bit of a fight, and both parents died. They were murdered basically. But Nancy and Deleth had time to escape. So Nancy was forced really to look after Deleth. And one of the things Nancy would do, I mean, because the house was burnt and parents killed, so of course she had to feed herself and Deleth. But one of the things she used to do was to come down to the rocks at night when the tide was low and fish. But of course she never had a fishing rod or anything sort of modern sort of stuff. But she'd sit by a rock pool, and of course she could sit perfectly still for ages. She'd just sit by a rock pool, wait until the tide come in and fill the rock pool, and watch the fish coming into the rock pools. And of course there was a lot more stuff around there, a lot more crabs and fish, a lot more than there is now. And of course, like quick as lightning, she'd grab not just one, but probably 2 fish, If she was really hungry, she'd bite the head off and eat it there and then. But then, of course, she'd take the fish back where she'd left Deleth, light a fire, and if it was safe, she'd light a fire. Because the smoke, of course, would be seen by these weird villagers. Light the fire and cook the fish. But and that went on for a long time, and she'd hunt in the woods and eat birds' eggs and so on. Also, all sorts of ways of surviving that we've lost today. And this one particular night, the tide was low, the tide was perfect for going fishing, and off she went. But somebody must have seen her, because she was attacked on the rocks by the villagers, but she ran the other way. And of course she could run across the rocks, like a deer, just to the villagers. But of course she ran right into a small group of villagers who were the other side, knowing of course that she'd run the other way, and they caught her. And one of them had a scythe, the big things you cut grass with, slashed out at her and cut her leg. And she dived into the sea. Of course she could swim like a fish, but of course she was quite badly injured. And Deleth, of course, was in the woods waiting for her, and of course she never turned up. But she survived, and she was basically washed up on the beach in Brandy Cove. And there was one character that lived in Brandycote at the time, a guy called Jack, and people used to call him Jack the Crab. Oh no, he's not, a Jack Rab. Jack the Crab, see? Jack Crab. And he used to catch crabs and take them into Swansea to sell, but he found her on the beach, and he was a nice old chap. Picked her up and took her to his little shack in that part of the Gower, and nursed her back to health. And it wasn't long, of course, before she recovered and went back. But of course, she was never right after that. She was quite a bit of a limp. And that's basically as far as the story goes. Because after that, there's no record of it at all. Well, not that there ever was any sort of written record anyway, but it's all story. But then one day, many years later, there was a big thunderstorm. And lightning struck this big oak tree. And the oak tree fell and split. And inside the oak tree was a skeleton. And one of the legs of the skeleton was bone. The bone was chipped. So really, we think that was Nancy. So there we are, and that's the story of Nancy and Della. So whether you believe it is entirely up to you.